class of 1944. We are gathered here today to pay tribute to this great American. But first, please allow me to introduce the principal of Churchland High School, Dr. Susan S. Beckholm.
Good afternoon, Churchland community and many of our Churchland students. It has been a thrill and a privilege to be a part of planning and organizing today's ceremony. I want to make sure that those of you who are visiting Churchland for the first time in a long time realize how much we appreciate all of the history that you have provided those of us who still walk the halls of Churchland High School. Learning and becoming familiar with Richard Shea, his friends and loved ones, has been absolutely a tremendous learning experience for myself. I cannot begin to tell you how thrilled we are that this event is happening today. And as we progress through today's activities and the rest of our school year, we certainly will become more and more familiar with the life and the legacy that Richard Shea left to those of us who are still here. Again, I am thrilled to have all of you here. I hope that this ceremony lives up to your expectations. And to those of you who are visiting us today, please know that you are welcome back at Churchland High School anytime you so desire. Thank you again for coming, and I hope you enjoy today's ceremony.
At this time, please rise for the presentation of colors, followed by the national anthem. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Would you please remain standing for the invocation by chaplain of the Korean War Veterans Association, Mr. Leo G. Russell.
Today we are here to honor Lieutenant Richard Thomas Shea Jr. and others who served their country and gave their lives so that we may gather here and live in freedom. We need to be constantly reminded of our gift of freedom and of those who gave all to make sure future generations continue to know life in a free, democratic society. Remembering those who have passed is only half of the task that we have before us today. We must also carry their love, honor, and duty forward to the future generations that will pass. Our children must know who they were, what they did, and why they did it. To be or do anything less will be a disservice to their sacrifice and their memories. Those who have gone created a clear pathway for us to continue on. We must never waver from the path of freedom and democracy. Take their memories, take their dreams, and walk forward, shouldering the cause of freedom, carry it high and proud. They did, and now we must walk forward for them and for our children. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please be seated. At this time, I will now introduce Mr. Portsmouth, who is the high school classmate of Lieutenant General.
Good afternoon. Richard Thomas Shea. He was a leader, a scholar, and a friend. As a leader, he was the president of our class from the time we started elementary school until we graduated from high school. He was a member of the student council, and in the senior class, he was voted best all around and the most likely to succeed. He was also a school bus driver. In those days, students drove school buses. And unless you lived close enough to school to walk, you rode the bus. The buses were full. You didn't see them like in our town. Also, the school didn't have a big parking lot. The school buses parked right at the back of the school. But nobody had a car that they could drive to school in. You must remember that during this period of time, we were involved in World War II. There were a lot of families that did not have a car. Some families had one car. Someone that had more than one car, they were very unusual and probably rich. So you didn't hop in your car and run back and forth. And you didn't think about having your parents take you to school in the family car. They didn't have the gasoline to do it because gasoline was rationed. And there was no parking space in school either. They didn't provide for that. It just did not occur. And so we did have school buses that had student drivers, unlike today. As a scholar, Richard, I guess would be part of a scholar. He was the lead in the senior class play. He was also the art editor of the school paper called The Country. He had 2 comic strips in that paper. One of them was called The Little Moron, and the other one was called Paul Decoy. I used to claim that he modeled that after me. But his most important thing as a scholar, he was on the honor roll. And he had been continuously on the honor roll all through school. And being in that position, when it come time for us to graduate, we didn't have valedictorians and so forth. We had honor graduates that spoke. And he was the chairman of the graduation exercises. Then as a friend, Richard was a good friend, a pal. We palled around together all the time at school. We had many of the same classes. Fortunately, he was much smarter than I, and some of his was able to rub off on me to help me with some studies. But we had many of the same classes. We went back and forth between classes together. We went to lunch together. We were pretty much together all day in school. Someone might say, well, how did you pal around after school? No. The reason for that being that I lived in West Haven, and Richard lived on Dock Landing Road. If any of you know where Dock Landing Road is. Dock Landing Road starts at Portsmouth Boulevard, where McDonald's is now. And it runs a pretty straight course and goes over a little creek, and then it kind of has a zigzag in it. Well, I think the zigzag is still there, but once you reach that point when we were in school, the road was a dirt road. And it continued on to be a dirt road until it intersected with Jolliffe Road. And so Richard lived on this dirt road part, which was all farmland. And the road was kind of sandy. And if you can try riding a bicycle on sandy, you know what I'm talking about. But some of us would get on our bicycles, and I can remember Thomas Lane and I got together on our bicycles, and we went out and rode down what is now Portsmouth Boulevard, which was then a two-lane highway. And we rode past Simonsdale, and from there on it was farmland. In fact, Simonsdale was a new community. It was built just to house war workers, people that worked in the Navy Yard. And we had a good time out at Richards. We went out and messed around the bar, go down and hang out around the creek. And a ways from his house was some Civil War trenches back in the woods, and we went back in, played around them. We made our way all the way over to Pine Grove Dairy. Anyway, that area was pretty much unpopulated, and so unless you made the trip on a bicycle or you had a car, you didn't scoot back and forth. There wasn't any such thing as you could say to Richard, well, come on over to my house after school, and he could scoot on over. It wasn't done. But we were good pals in school, and we stayed together pretty much all the time. One of the things that I remember us doing, I said the war was going on, and the school had in the hallway on the second floor a stamp booth. Students could go there at specific times. The booth was manned during certain days. I don't know whether it was one day a week or what it was, but during these days, there were students there manning the booth that would sell stamps to other students. Now, these stamps, you would get a little book to put them in, and the stamps would cost you 25 cents. When you got $18.75 worth, you could take it to the bank and cash it in for a $25 war bond. Actually, the sale of these stamps, not just our school, but the sale of the stamps and war bonds is what built an aircraft carrier, which was launched during that time, called Shangri-La. And if you could figure out a way to get there, the school let us off that day to go see the Shangri-La being launched. People all over the place in the Navy Yard watched that big carrier go down into the Illustrious River. But the stamp booth was manned by 3 pretty girls from our class, and they manned this booth during their study period. Well, us 3 guys also happened to have study period at the same time, and so we would go there and help them watch the money and see that they had plenty of help around the booth. But they were the official ones. We just went there. But it was good knowing Richard. I considered him my best friend. And when he was at West Point, I was invited up to his wedding, which took place on his graduation day. And I couldn't make that, but I did see him some after that. He would come home and he'd visit with his brother Bill, and I would go by there and see him. And the last time he was there was with his wife, and she was expecting, and Richard was getting ready to go to Korea. And so Richard and I went over to Smith Brothers Amateur Station, corner of High and Rotten Avenue. And Raymond Smith was a good friend of ours, and he had grown up with us. And Richard wanted us to sign his last will. After that night, I never saw him again. He didn't come back from Korea alive. But it was great knowing him while he was. He was a good friend and a great guy.
I will now introduce Lieutenant Colonel Vince Bailey, who was the West Point classmate of Lieutenant Shea.
I'm not from Portsmouth. I'm from New York. The speaker before me said he was going to be brief. So I thought I had a lot of time. Being from New York, I speak a lot faster than the Portsmouth people do. So I'm not going to shorten anything. First, I'd like to acquaint you with Dick Shea, West Point cadet. Richard T. Shea Jr. was an ordinary guy at the academy, just a very ordinary cadet. Now let me explain what ordinary means in cadet terms. In our day, the Corps of Cadets consisted of about 2,400 bodies, all men. There were no women in the Corps at that time. We were organized into 2 regiments of 1,200 men each. When arrayed on a parade field, the Corps looked like a huge V to the spectators. The flankers were on the outside.
The ranks were on the inside. In between each of these groups were the ordinary cadets, men of normal or ordinary growth, standing about 5'10", weighing about 150 to 160 pounds. These ordinary cadets were the bulwark of the Corps. Dick, Shea, and I were among this group. We ordinary guys considered the groups on either side of us that had growth abnormalities. We prayed for them every day. Dick had spent 4 years in the Army, which included 1 year in college at VPI, 2 years in Germany, 1 year at West Point Prep School before entering the academy. It was while stationed in Germany with our occupation forces that he began his illustrious track career, winning the European Championship in the 1600 and 5,000 meter run. During this period, he also earned the Expert Infantryman's Badge, a very coveted award, earned by completing a series of infantry field tests, physical and weapons firing trials. It's more difficult to earn this badge than the combat infantry badge. There are fewer holders of the Expert Badge than of the combat badge. After 1 year at prep school, Dick received a presidential appointment to the academy. He entered with the class of 1952. During all 4 years at West Point, he was at the top of our class in physical fitness and ability. One of our classmates who attended the prep school with Dick told me how Dick would practice his leaping ability by doing standing draw jumps over the rifle racks in the barracks area. These racks were about 4 feet high. Now, that's an amazing feat. At the academy, he was always running, never walking to any destination if he could help it. He'd rise before reveille, run for an hour, stop off at the Catholic chapel on his way. He was a very religious person, attending Mass every morning while a cadet. I'm sure he missed a few, but not very many. He was a fierce competitor and put forth his maximum effort in everything he did. He developed tremendous endurance for long-distance running, and it paid off in collegiate competition. At one meet, the star runner of the opposing university commented to Dick during warm-ups that he felt pretty good. He was going to run a 4:10 mile. After the men departed, Dick turned to a classmate and remarked, "I guess that means I'll have to run a 4:09. And he did. He won the race. He set a new academy record for the mile run. In 3 years of varsity competition, Cadet Shea won 9 championship races. He set 5 academy track records. Some stood more than 10 years later. As a final tribute to his accomplishments on the field of defending strife, at graduation he was selected by the Army Athletic Association as the most outstanding athlete in our class. In 2004, Lieutenant Richard T. Shea Jr. was inducted with the inaugural group into the West Point Athletic Hall of Fame, along with such football greats as Glenn Davis and Doc Clancy. Dick was a hard-working, energetic individual, determined to succeed in whatever he endeavored. His military aptitude was just as outstanding. In those days, the cadet's military standing within the Corps was determined by individual performance, by a vote of his peers, and an appraisal by the Academy Tactical Club. These were composed of officers who had seen combat in World War II. Dick was selected top man by his cadet company mates, and so endorsed by the TAC. He was appointed cadet company commander his first class year, and ranked at number 17 militarily out of 527 graduates in our class. Cadet company commanders usually roomed in the first floor, front room of the 4-story barracks we occupied. Not Dick. He selected the top floor, front room, so he could keep in shape, climbing 3 flights of stairs, 2 at a time, about 10 times a day. This didn't sit too well with his roommates, but they had no choice. Dick Shea was also a gifted artist. This may have carried over from his high school days. He drew cartoons for the Pointer Cadet magazine and for other publications, as well as our 52 yearbook. His most noble and most remembered achievement in this artistic field was designed for our class crest. The crest which you see here on our 52 banners was designed by Dick while a cadet. Now I'd like to tell you a little bit about Richard T. Shea, Jr., U.S. Army Infantry Lieutenant. Dick had spent 4 years in the Army, as I said, as an enlisted man and a non-commissioned officer, and 4 years as a cadet. He was embarking on his long-sought career as an officer in the regular Army. It would be a short but glorious career, spanning only 13 months, almost to the day. A branch of service and unit assignment were drawn in the spring before graduation. It was a lottery based upon academic standing. Only the combat arms could be selected. Academically, Dick stood 283 out of 527. He chose infantry, was assigned to the 30th Infantry Regiment at Fort Benning, Georgia. At that time, all graduates were required to attend their branch school before their initial assignment. Dick had the opportunity at that time to try out for the U.S. Olympic team, but he was eager to pursue the career he had looked forward to ever since he applied for an appointment to West Point. Competitive running was behind him. He was now a lieutenant of infantry and ready to assume his leadership role. Thus it was that Dick and Joyce arrived at Fort Benning, the home of the infantry school, in July 1952. They rented an apartment off post, and Dick began the basic infantry officers course, BIOC. 4 months orientation on infantry small unit operations and tactics, and it consisted of classroom and field work, as well as weapons qualifications. Dick was already an expert infantry, but he re-qualified expert on the carbine, the M1 rifle, and the M1 pistol. The M1 pistol was a 45 caliber semi-automatic. It was introduced in 1901. Specifically, to be used against the Moro tribesmen in the Philippines during that insurrection. Here we were 50 years later, still using the same heavy sidearm. It was accurate only in the hands of an expert, but very lethal at close range. Dick was to find this weapon very useful in actions to come later in the career. In the months ahead, Dick and Joyce found that it was a challenge to live on $222 a month pay at St. Louis. I remember in my own case that the cupboard was usually bare by the end of the month. One time around the end of August or September during the BIOC, I asked my wife, what's for dinner? She said, a can of Franks and beans. I said, that's all we have, 1 can of Franks and beans. She said, no, we have 2 cans. You have your choice, Campbell's or A&P brand. I think we all found out that the old adage of 2 can live as cheaply as 1 wasn't quite accurate. Following BIOC, most of us, including Dick, had volunteered for jump school. This was a month of conditioning, learning PLFs, the parachute landing ball, and how to maneuver a chute in midair. Just as BIOC was a breeze for Dick, this was even easier. Our non-com instructors were eager to put their hands on those West Pointers and run them into the ground. Dick was a disappointment. He ran them into the ground. Looking back 56 years, I think we all qualified. It took 5 day jumps and 1 night jump, and you were a parachute. BIOC and jump school behind us, Dick, myself, and another classmate, Jack Little, reported to the 30th Infantry at Fort Benning. The 30th was a school troop unit which staged all the live firing demonstrations for the infantry school. Almost all of the officers and men in the 30th were Korean veterans, some spending their last months in service. They had much to offer us new young lieutenants. We 3 gained much useful experience leading and executing such infantry actions as the rifle platoon in the attack of a fortified position, fighting in towns and villages, and many other infantry missions. All of them under live fire conditions. Dick learned the capability of support weapons like machine guns, mortars, and recoil rifles. He would need all this basic knowledge when he got to Korea. His stay in the 30th was short. He had received orders to report to Korea in May. He and Joyce would depart Fort Benning in late March 1953. She was 4 months pregnant with Richard T. Shea III. At the time with family and friends and days of travel to the Far East, Dick arrived in Korea. Assigned to Company A, 1st Battalion, 17th Infantry Regiment. They were nicknamed the Buffalo. Most of the following detail of Dick's battlefield experience is taken from Return to Glory, a book written by Major General Bill McWilliams, a West Point grad in the class of 1955. When Dick arrived in Korea in May of '53, battle lines had been stable for almost 2 years. Outpost positions and the main defense line were covered with deep trenches and bunkers, underground command posts and caves. There were constant efforts to improve and strengthen these positions in order to reduce casualties from mortar and artillery barrages. Dick's initial assignment was a weapons platoon leader in 800. This wasn't new to him. He had conducted live fire demonstrations of this platoon in action while serving with the 30th Infantry at Denver. He had complete knowledge of his platoon's capability and schemes of deployment. His company was initially in reserve, but in June moved up to occupy positions on Pork Chop Hill along the outpost line. By now, Dick had been elevated to company executive office. He had new responsibilities. His artistic ability was useful in sketching the defensive positions on Pork Chop. He became familiar with every trench line and bunker on that piece of terrain. The Chinese positions looked down on Pork Chop from high ground, much like I'm looking down on you from this stage. Any mass movement would draw immediate enemy fire. Dick was now responsible for reinforcing and strengthening the hill's defenses. He routinely made rounds to bunkers and fighting positions, checking on the status of ammo, supplies, and communication. During these evening forays, he reassured the young soldiers, giving them words of encouragement and instilling confidence. On 6 July, under cover of darkness and a heavy rainstorm, 2 battalions of Chinese infantry assaulted Pork Chop Hill. Dick was on the hill at the time and rushed to the threatened area. Through the night and into daylight, he was involved in organizing and leading counterattacks to eject the Chinese from positions they had overrun. In addition, he circulated along friendly positions, checking, steadying the men, and distributing ammunition. He knew the layout, and even in the dark, he knew where every position was. At daylight, he was confronted by a group of Chinese in the trench line. He used that .45 pistol to cut down 4 or 5 of the enemy, then killed 2 more with his trench line before the remainder retreated. This battle for Pork Chop Hill was to last for 5 days. During the first 2 days, Dick led 5 counterattacks against the enemy. On 8 July, his unit was ordered to withdraw. They had been in a non-stop, all-out fight for 48 hours. He took the responsibility to contact an isolated platoon of Company A, because he alone knew their position as well as those now occupied by the Chinese. In the course of this mission, he encountered a group of 20 men from a counterattacking unit of his own battalion. The officers and non-counters had been killed or seriously wounded. They were leaders. Seeing their confusion, he took charge. He reorganized the group and renewed the counterattack, which was their mission. An enemy machine gun emplacement opened fire on the group. Dick maneuvered forward, silenced the gun with 2 grenades, then killed a 3-man crew with his carbine. It was the last of the counterattacks he led during the battle. He was last seen in hand-to-hand combat with enemy soldiers. No surviving soldier witnessed Dick Shea's death. He was reported missing in action and his death not officially confirmed until April the following year. He was buried here in Portsmouth in June 1954, 2 years after his graduation from West Point. 6th Battalion CO in Korea wrote to Joyce, "But Dick's action was beyond the call to duty. He had taken command of a group of men who had lost their leader when he could have evacuated himself. His actions saved lives because the troops he took over were lost without leadership." He went on to say that he considered Dick the most outstanding officer of his grade he had ever served with. 8 years of preparation and 1 year of performing the duties of an infantry leader came to an end in 2 days and nights of bloody combat for Lieutenant Richard T. Shea Jr. In his final days of life, everything he did was geared to accomplish the mission assigned and to look out for the welfare of the troops. This is the mark of a true combat leader. From the time Dick left Churchill High School in May of 1944, he devoted himself to the service of his country. From the time of his entry into West Point, he lived up to the ideals of duty, honor, and country. West Point class in 1952 thanks you for the opportunity to recount our memories with Churchill High School graduate, of our friend and classmate, Congressional Medal of Honor winner, First Lieutenant Richard T. Shea.
We will now have a presentation of First Lieutenant Shea's Shadow Box about Chapter 191 of the Korean War Veteran.
I appreciate everyone coming from the various areas of your life. I never knew Richard Shea, but I knew about him. I'm a member of the 17th Infantry Regiment Association. I served with the 17th for 2 years in Japan before the war, and then in Korea with the 32nd Regiment, the 7th Infantry Division. And with the help of Chapter 191 Korean War Veterans Association, Churchland High School Association class 1940 to 45, West Point class in 1952, a few other individuals contributed or supported this effort, and certainly Churchland High School opened its doors when the suggestion was made. And on behalf of these organizations and individuals, I'd like to present the Churchland High School a shadow box honoring Lieutenant Richard Shea. Before I deliver the benediction, I just want to have someone say a word. This gentleman, Colonel Nam, recently escorted Joyce, Dick Shea's widow, to the 17th Infantry Regiment reunion outside of Seattle, Washington. And Dick wants to make a presentation to Churchland High School and say a word.
Thank you, Chaplain. My name is Judge Stuart Nam. I'm here from North Carolina, but I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York, so I'll talk real fast. 3 years ago, I was Secretary of the 7th Infantry Association. 3 years ago, my wife Nancy and I decided, based on my experience in documentaries, to do a documentary for 1 hour about the history of the 17th Infantry in the Korean War. I had been in ROTC at City College of New York and graduated right after the Korean War. And when I finished BIOC, as Dick did, I was shipped to Korea and I became a platoon leader in the 17th Infantry in George Company. Subsequent to that, I became the assistant S1. Of course, today I just got a promotion from lieutenant to colonel. I was just a lieutenant, not a colonel. But something special happened to my wife and myself working for 2 years on that documentary. The special thing was a man known as Lieutenant Richard Shea. I almost feel that I knew him as a friend, although I never knew him when he was living. I almost feel that his spirit travels with me every day because of the things that I know about him. During the course of the interviews for our documentary, we found 2 survivors of Pork Chop Hill who were there when Lieutenant Shea was killed by the enemy, and when he performed the heroic deeds you heard about today. Both of them, without hesitation, one an enlisted man and the other lieutenant, who was the one who went to Joyce Shea to tell her that Dick was indeed gone and he was not simply missing in action. Both, without hesitation, said to me, Judge, he was the greatest soldier, the greatest officer, the most heroic person I have ever seen in my life. That was your Lieutenant Richard Shea. The 1 hour documentary that my wife and I were going to do ended up being a 3.5 hour documentary. And I'm going to present 3 copies of them to your school principal and to the ROTC so you people can see the history of the 17th Infantry in the Korean War. I hope that some of you students will take the time to see that documentary, especially those of you who are in the ROTC. There's just one other thing that I'd like to tell you about. 3 weeks ago, the 17th Infantry Regiment Association had its reunion in Tacoma, Washington. Joyce Himka, who was Joyce Shea and Dick Shea's widow, nobody knew where she was. We knew that, my wife and I knew that her name was Himka and that her husband worked for Boeing. With the internet being what it is today, we found Joyce Himka. We became good friends with Joyce Himka, and 3 weeks ago, Nancy and I invited Joyce and her present husband, to whom she's been married almost 50 years now, to the association's reunion dinner. It was a wonderful occasion for us just to meet her, having written to her, having spoken to her by telephone, having seen the letters that Dick Shea, who was a great letter writer, a great cartoonist, and a great person, had written to her from Pork Chop Hill. That night, Richard Shea was honored as a distinguished member of the regiment more than 50 years after he earned the Congressional Medal of Honor. And on the same night, Joyce Shea was honored as an honorary member of the regiment. So for Nancy and myself, and for Mrs. Shea, or Mrs. Himka, that was a very, very special night that we'll never forget. But again, I sensed that Dick Shea was with us all the time. And Joyce asked me in an email just 3 days ago to tell you that if Dick Shea were here today, listening to what people have been saying and seeing what's being done today, his only words would have been, "Holy cow." Thank you.
We can have any kind of rank we want to. My Army records were burned in the fire in St. Louis in 1972. Fortunately, I kept copies of them. But had I not kept copies, I could have made myself anything I wanted to be because the records are gone. But I was just a private in the rear ranks in Korea and Japan. But I served with men like Richard Shea. And I served under them. And I will never forget that. Never forget that. I'm going to deliver the benediction. And Churchland High School holds a special place in my heart. I have a son who graduated from here not too many years ago. and I knew many, many students, and I've seen the great things that they have done. And I know some students here now, and I have a lot of respect for you and your teachers. And I just hope and pray that you take advantage as these other kids that I know have. But the benediction that I chose was not written by me. There's a young lady who is a graduate of Churchman High School, class of 1969, Gina Arts. Gina 9 is her name, maiden name. Gina writes much, much better than I do. And I shared what I had about Richard Shea with her, and this is the benediction that Gina wrote. Thank you, Gina. The graduate training, the sweat, the pain, the struggle to endure each day's strain, wondering, will I be something in this life of mine? Will I make a difference in the world in my time? Richard Shea started as many young boys do, growing up with a loving family and a strong faith too. Churchman High School was where he flourished. His teachers provided knowledge, and his mind was nourished. During college he worked, studied, and ran, setting goals for himself to be the best was his plan. World War II was barely over when he signed up to go. The Army gained a leader, which the world loved to know. Soon, he was a track star at West Point Academy. Dick just willed his feet to fly with amazing agility. He ran cross-country races and sprinted as well. As an officer and athlete, he strived to excel. But his young life, it seemed to be indestructible, and his endurance was strong. But his young life would meet tragedy before too long. Decisions and opportunities quickly came to go to Helsinki Olympics to run for fame. With prayers, wife's support, and a dedicated soul, he gave up his Olympic run, but the Army won gold. Stationed in Korea, where many battles would rage, this soldier's courage would take center stage. He led his troops to fight on July 8th at Fort Chop Hill, a defining moment in history where many good men were killed. The proud 7th Infantry, who loved Lieutenant Shea, ran with him bravely up the bloody hill that day. With courage that is rarely seen, the sacrifice was done. The battlefield raged with combat, and the U.S. Army won. Their leader gave them inspiration, courage, and pride. Dick Shea fought heroically, was wounded, and at the age of 26, he died. He never asked for glory. He just gave his life for all. When God and country called him to duty, he answered that call. We give thanks to this soldier, Lieutenant Richard Shea, all honor and glory are his today. Without a doubt, the soldier sacrificed, but truly, he won the race. Amen. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, this concludes the ceremony for Lieutenant Richard Shea. All church students, please return back to the classroom.